Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's your bearded brothers here. I'm Matt.
Chris.
And we are back again with yet another sports podcast. Okay. So, this is going to be another one of those weeks where things are weird. Because there isn't a lot of sports. Well, there's some sports news, but there's not a lot of NFL news, and there certainly are no NFL games. And I don't think Chris and I want to try to pick all the hockey games right now. That's not something I think we can do. First off, they play every night, and it would just take forever to go through that. Like, way worse than that. We'll probably do something once the playoffs start.
Like, once the playoffs starts.
We'll probably do playoff brackets the way we did for the NFL. But I don't think we're going to do anything until then. I'm thinking about doing, for me, and I don't know if Chris would want to join, as part of Hockey Corner, do like a 10-team power rankings for hockey. Who are the top 10 teams in the NHL right
now? Honestly, I haven't watched enough hockey to be able to contribute properly to that.
So this time, Chris and I have decided that what we're going to do is after we talk about the news, we're going to go back and we're going to do a redraft of the 2012 NFL draft. We'll explain the rules to it when we get there because we did come up with some rules for it because we don't want to just have it be, whatever. All right, guys, so my apologies if Chris looks a little pixelated. I'm doing the recording this week, and our connection may not be the greatest. Is what it is. I'm sure y'all will get over it. Okay, so let's talk about some news first, because there has been just a little bit of news. In fact, there's even an NHL trade that broke today while I was doing the TTRPG that I do. It actually broke right during when we were playing that. So, let's cover some news. All right. I guess first things first. There's been a lot of NFL coordinator hirings now.
Yeah, there have been quite a few. I think there are still some more that have to be done.
There are still a few more. I was going to say the Broncos hired Vance Joseph.
Yes.
Was that his name? Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
He's their defensive coordinator. He's their defensive coordinator now. He was their head coach back in the day.
Yeah, at one point. Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Like, that would have been really funny if they'd have hired Nathaniel Hackett to be the offensive coordinator and Vance Joseph to be the defensive coordinator. Something about that would have been unbearably hilarious to me.
Who was that one guy that you wanted to get that coordinator job?
Jim Bob Cooter, and he got it.
Jim Bob Cooter.
Jim Bob Cooter. That's the greatest name ever. I do know his name is James Richard Cooter is his actual name, but Jim Bob. Yeah. Fuck that. Jim Bob Cooter. He is the Colts offensive coordinator now.
Good luck.
Well, he was the passing game coordinator in this last season in Jacksonville. And I think we can all agree they had a decent passing attack.
No. I don't mean as in, like, he can't do something. I mean, good luck with, like,
the Colts as a whole.
Got to work with.
Totally, I get it. Yeah.
They don't have much at the moment.
Well, they may after the draft.
Maybe. They may after the draft. That's the big point.
Yeah. So, they may after the draft. Also, the new head coach of the Cardinals, I don't know if we mentioned it or not, he hired
he hired
the linebackers coach from the Eagles to be his defensive coordinator, and he hired was it Indianapolis's passing game coordinator or quarterbacks coach?
I think so. He even said that he would have taken the Eagles offensive coordinator if he hadn't gotten a different job.
Yeah. Which I find that's funny to me. And then the Chiefs hired an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, they promoted from within
Yeah, but it's a guy who's
Matt
been around
Nagy.
for Matt Nagy. I was going to say he's been around
He's
a
known
while.
he's known for being the ex-head coach of the Bears.
And then didn't the Eagles get a new defensive coordinator?
Yes, I think so. I don't
I
think
think
they've
it was
replaced
him.
their offensive yet. I think it is their defensive that they
Yeah,
filled.
and it's a guy who was a head coach, and now he is saying that he doesn't care about head coaching anymore.
I think so. Who was that?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I didn't write any of this down like I
Mm.
usually do, because I was focused on doing the draft stuff.
Okay.
So go me. I literally know none of this. Um, I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, they got another coordinator. Um, so I think that's just all kind of interesting. Um, outside of that, there was brains. Aaron Rodgers came out of his darkness retreat in Oregon.
I know. Still no news on that yet.
Well, apparently he saw his shadow, so that means another 2 years of no Super Bowl for the Packers.
Well, yeah, it's still conflicting reports on what I hear from all of that. So there hasn't been
There's
any official
conflicting
announcements.
reports.
Yeah.
There's been reports that he doesn't want to go to the
I mean,
Raiders anymore. There's
the,
who the hell
well,
knows?
there's reports that the Raiders don't even want him anymore. Like
There's reports the Raiders don't want him. There's even reports that he has said himself, I don't talk to the media. Nobody in my camp talks to the media. So whatever you hear from these guys is absolute garbage, which I think is garbage because we all know that people in his camp talk to the media when he wants them to. He is a master manipulator for that.
He is, yeah.
So,
I don't think we're gonna know for sure 100% what's gonna happen with Rodgers until it happens. Like until like the official announcement comes through. That he gets traded, you just have to assume that he's going to play for the Packers. Like I don't think he will play for the Packers, but that's what you have to assume until you hear officially from him that he's retiring, or until you hear the official news of the trade. You have to assume that what is currently true stays true.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Other things that are interesting right now. Let's see here. Bobby Wagner and the Rams have parted ways as part of a cap cutting maneuver, a cost saving maneuver.
I've also heard the rumor that the Rams potentially are looking to trade Jalen Ramsey as well.
That's been all over the place. Yeah, they're looking to trade him off. I have no idea where he goes. He's been decent, but not Jalen Ramsey.
I mean, hey, he's been better than anything Minnesota has.
Yeah, but there's no way we afford that under our cap constraints right now.
Currently, no. You're right.
We'd have to make some major moves first. Then we could.
Though we have pieces that I'm sure that the Rams would be okay with taking too, though. So who knows?
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe a Dalvin Cook for Ramsey style trade. That wouldn't be horrible.
I mean, it's not like I don't think it'll happen, but it wouldn't be the worst thing ever, in my opinion.
No, I don't think it would be either. I think that makes some sense at the very least. Let's see here. Tyler Lewan, the left tackle for the Tennessee Titans, has also been released as part of a cost-cutting procedure. And he's not mad about it, and he totally understands the position they're in. So I would say the Vikings need it, but they really don't. They're Darisaw and O'Neal are pretty much locked up.
Doing pretty good,
That's a pretty good position to be in.
It's one of the few times that like that Minnesota really doesn't need to mess with their offensive line too much in the draft. Like maybe only one or two spots, maybe arguably, but the O line's actually pretty decent. It's not great, but it's pretty decent, like in comparison to what you need to work with on the defense, anyways.
Yeah. So that's a thing as well. Hi, Loki. Okay. And let me see here. That's really the big news out of there. The last one was something that came out just recently. former Dolphins quarterback Byron Jones has said that due to the injuries that he sustained while playing football, he can no longer run or jump, at least not at the moment. He just had major ACL, or surgery on his Achilles tendon, not ACL. He's not retiring yet. He's still looking for another contract and trying to get back to being able to run and jump. But he did point out that what he wanted to tell people was he's played for 8 years, and he said to the rookies, do not take the pills they give you, do not take the injections, go to an outside doctor if you have to. Take care of yourself because the team does not care about you. They care about winning now. They will sacrifice your health for their current benefit. And I don't disagree with him on that. I think that's a good message to send out.
Well, yes and no. We have to remember that not every team organization is interacting that way. Like, you have to remember that you have to take that with a grain of salt based upon the experiences that he experienced with the organizations he experienced them with, right? So, I understand what he's saying, but that doesn't mean that just because one organization does some shady practices doesn't mean that all of them do. You know what I'm saying? So...
Yeah.
Overall, I don't think it's a bad message, but I think it's also one that you do have to take with a certain amount of grain of salt. That's all.
Okay.
I think it's fair to point that out.
No, I can see where you're coming from. Totally.
Like, do all of them probably shade a little bit? Sure. But some probably are far worse than others. And I think you could probably think of some just off the top of your head.
Yeah, okay. I can get behind what you're saying.
See what I'm saying now? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, with that being said, the other big news was all NHL, the trade deadline, the trade market in the NHL is starting to really heat up. I think we talked about last time that the Toronto Maple Leafs, if we didn't, the Toronto Maple Leafs went up with Ryan O'Reilly.
I think we did talk about that.
I think we did talk about that because that was a pretty major trade. The one that broke today is the Winnipeg Jets. Remember, I said fuck the Winnipeg Jets. But they made a pretty big move today. They acquired Nino Niederreiter from the Nashville Predators for, if I remember right, it is literally a second-round pick in 2024.
Okay.
That's not bad
No,
at
that's
all.
not too bad.
The big one, though, for me was the Bruins got both Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway. Look,
Fuck
man.
the Bruins.
I know you hate the Bruins, but adding Orlov, who is a top pairing defenseman, just makes them meaner. I don't know what it is about the Bruins, but the Bruins don't have a problem finding people that play Bruins hockey. And if you don't know what I mean...
Yeah, I was going to say, they're a pretty aggressive hockey team.
I was about to say, if you don't understand what I mean when I say Bruins hockey, for the last decade, 15 years maybe, Bruins hockey has been separating human skulls from the rest of the skeleton. Yeah. They play a very aggressive, mean style. For Christ's sakes, for a while on defense, they had a guy named Zdeno Chara who's 6'9".
Like, we're talking the equivalent of, if you can't beat them, beat them.
And then there's Trent Frederick. I mean, Trent Frederick is that exact same mold. They drafted him in a draft, fairly low down, too, like 29th overall or something. And his whole thing is just a fist dispensary. For Christ's sakes, this is the same team that drafted Milan Lucic, and young Milan Lucic was a fist dispensary. You didn't even need to put in a quarter. It was like Rock'em Sock'em Robots every time he was on the ice. He was getting in a fight.
He's looking for a fight, and he's gonna fight somebody.
And he's gonna find a fight somewhere. And if not, he's gonna manufacture a fight to have.
Yep, he's gonna have a fight at some point in the game.
Yeah. And I mean, the Bruins this year are, just so that you understand where I'm coming from on this. You may not like the Bruins. You may hate them with the passion that I hate the Winnipeg Jets. But this year they've played 57 games. They're 44-8 with 5 overtime losses, and they have 93 points. You could pretty much say they've locked up the 1 seed. The only team that's anywhere close to them in the East is Carolina, who has 86. They're almost a full 10 points behind them.
Mm-hmm.
It's stupid. It's just stupid.
Not surprising, though.
They have 216 goals for and 123 against. They're a plus 93. Jesus Christ. It's sad. It's ridiculous.
Fuck the Bruins.
You can say that all you want, but you know they're probably going to win the cup this year.
I don't want to hear it. La, 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 la. I'd rather see Avalanche win it again for goddamn, like for real.
Colorado.
I would rather. That's how much I don't like the Bruins. I would rather see the Avalanche win again.
Outside of that, the only other one. Remember how I said last week that I didn't think Kane might get moved because of his injury and everything else? Well, this week he left the team road trip and he's back in Chicago prior to the deadline on March 3rd, as apparently there are teams starting to inquire about him now. Well, there you go. So I guess he is going to get moved. Also apparently, it's leaked out that apparently the asking price that Arizona has for Jacob Chikrin is absurd.
Is that surprising, though?
I mean, a little, because it's so absurd and overpriced that teams don't really want to pay it. But I think Arizona's in a really weird spot here, and I kind of like where they're at. First off, they have him under contract at $4.5 million for 4 more years. They don't have to move him. Just like they have Vemelka under contract for another couple of years. They have quite a few draft picks already. They don't need to move off of these players. They're trying to prove that you need the players more than they need to move off of them, which currently, that's kind of true. You need this player more than they need to move off that player.
That's fair.
Yeah, and that's totally fair.
It does make sense. It's a seller's market basically at this point.
For them, it is. They don't. They have a lot of picks. They don't really need to accumulate more unless they want to. So they don't have to make that move. That move for them is why? Why would we make that move? Make it make sense for us. There is talk potentially coming out of the Bill Guerin Minnesota Wild office that Dumba may not move at the deadline. He may stay put.
I have heard that, yeah.
He may stay put and play out the season in Minnesota. I don't know if that means they've got an extension in the works. I would guess not, but it's possible.
It's possible.
They're pretty cap-strapped, and they've just recently been used in a pair of trades where they were used to retain salary. So, and they bought draft picks out of it, essentially.
Yep.
Which I think is a weird position to be in with the cap problems they're having. Although Guerin does expect, according to the guys like Michael Russo from The Athletic. By the way, shout out to Michael Russo of The Athletic, who's the beat reporter for The Wild for The Athletic. Apparently, Guerin expects to be very, very active at the deadline.
Okay.
Especially with the way the team's been playing. Now, I'm
curious to see what happens.
Well, I am too, because before the All-Star break, we were on a tear. We were doing a magnificent. The Wild were fucking tearing it down. Since the All-Star break, we've been a little flat. And I think Fleury lost his starting net position to the Gus Bus. Gustafsson has been... We almost beat Toronto. We took them to overtime, and they needed overtime to beat us. I think Gustafsson is probably our primary netminder for the rest of this year.
It's possible.
And I would guess, I think we have Fleury for 2 years? So I think we have him this year and next year?
I think so.
We could explore. I think we can hold on to him for the rest of this year and next year, and then the year after that, I think we'll probably bring up I can't remember the goalie's name now, but we have a young goalie down in the AHL right now who's fucking lighting the league on fire. Um, absolutely fantastic, and I can't remember his name now, and I should be shot for not being able to, because the only goalie I remember is the goalie who got drafted ahead of him, who was Sebastian Cosa, who is not doing nearly as well.
Okay.
So, yeah. Anyway, that's all here or there. All right,
Moving on.
moving on. So, draft time.
Draft time.
So here's the rules. We have rules. The rules
Sort of.
are as follows. First off, we're drafting them in the order that I found them on Wikipedia, which includes all the trades that already happened during the draft.
Yeah.
Chris and I are not...
That's what I was going off of.
Yeah. Chris and I are not trading draft picks. We aren't going to trade picks. We aren't going to try to make swaps. None of that. No. We're only doing the first round. And we are looking back at not just what they were at the time, but what was their career to this point. What's the point of doing a redraft if you can't look back and look at their careers and go, okay, yeah, this guy should have not gone in the third round. This guy should not have gone in the fifth round.
Yeah.
Now, Chris and I do not know, outside of the hotly contested first overall pick, we'll get to that in a minute here, Chris and I do not know who each other are drafting.
No.
Not at all. We have no idea.
In fact, I have no idea who I'm drafting until I draft that person.
And I don't either.
A lot of
the
it's
only one that I have,
what you draft.
the only one that I have written down anywhere is that first overall pick.
And I technically don't have any pick written down. I just have vague ideas of who I want where, depending on situation.
No, and that makes utter sense to me. And I am certainly not going to... There we go.
I'm hoping that some picks are obvious and some picks come way out of the blue, and
yeah, and that's kind of the point.
Kind of interesting. Yeah.
I do have a list here, and Chris has his list. He's expanded, I think, on the list that I made.
Mostly, yeah. I think there's only like a couple names I left off of your list that I didn't necessarily like for one reason or another.
And I totally get that. But I have a list here. Basically, what I did was I went through and I found all the people who were ever elected to a Pro Bowl from that draft, and then I grouped them by position, and I put them on a list, and that's the one I'm working off of, because I feel like if you made a Pro Bowl, you probably did pretty well with yourself at some point in time in the career.
Yep. So what I ended up doing is, thankfully, I have ESPN Plus, and so I was able to grab all stats from when the player was drafted, as well as being able to see all of the stats for every career of every player that happened during that draft. So ESPN Plus, thanks.
I also have ESPN Plus, but I wouldn't use that. I don't use that one. I tend to use.
It's great.
Oh, what is it? Football Reference.
Oh, Pro Football Reference. That was good too.
That's a fantastic site.
Yeah. Well, that one's good too.
Yeah.
In fact, I used that one a couple times. Actually, I used it to cross-reference a lot of stuff. But both of them have been very good. But they've made it very, very
I use
easy
Pro
for
Football
me to
Reference
go
and Pro
through them,
Basketball Reference very heavily when I do those trade dissections, by the way.
Yeah.
So they help immensely.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's kind of how I did a lot of mine. Is I did it off of Pro Bowls, but also some players that were really good that
never made a Pro Bowl.
Didn't necessarily make the Pro Bowl, but they were like really close seconds.
That was just not something I looked into. Because by the time I was done with just Pro Bowl players, I had 36 names, and there's only 32 picks. So I was like, I've got enough, and I stopped there because I'm lazy.
I have over 50 players.
Because you're not lazy. I am incredibly
lazy.
Well,
I am, but I also wanted to make sure that
you had some out of the blue bullshit that I don't have.
Well, some out of the blue stuff, but I also wanted to stay in the theme. I wanted to also be able to flex some options, basically.
No, and I get that. Because there are some of these guys who got selected to Pro Bowls early in their career, but they either had short careers or they stunk afterwards. 100%. I totally get it. But I was looking at it, and most of them had had overall decent careers.
Most of them were good, yeah.
Yeah. There's only a few that were like, who? What? Like, I recognize most of the names on here.
There's, I would say, out of the ones that I don't recognize, it's more the defensive side because I didn't start really paying attention to more defensive until I started getting older. So a lot of like the DBs, I don't recognize a lot of their names. There are some that I do, but there are like a couple. There's some that I'm just like I have no idea who that is.
I recognize all of them, which is why I didn't go looking deeper.
Yeah.
So,
So some of them I
also,
don't. Same thing with the defensive ends as well. There was
oh,
only
and
a
I
couple of
recognize
defensive
all of
ends
them
that I
as
never.
well because
But
I
I'm also
played.
younger,
Well,
so
my thing is, I also played a shitload of Madden, and so when I was trying to construct teams and make trades, these were people I looked at because
well, I
they
didn't
were
start
always
playing.
rated
Yeah,
halfway decently as a Madden player.
yeah. See, I didn't start playing Madden until I was probably 17, 18 is really when I started actually playing Madden.
Oh, dude.
Well past that
Like,
point.
I played Madden back on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My point.
Yeah. Like, when I started playing Madden, the bus was a big deal.
The bus, Jesus.
The bus, Jerome Bettis. And I still remember the
I mean, I
ads
do know who
one
that
year
is at least.
when the EA guys did the cyber versions of all the people. Like, they had Cyber Barry and Cyber Twan. That was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Best marketing campaign ever. I still remember the Barry Sanders fucking... Like, I remember watching him play. So, I got lucky.
I unfortunately did not get to watch that.
Dude.
Yeah.
That's like watching
Though I
Randy
get to
Moss
still watch
do.
the clips. I do get to still watch the clips, which is still fantastic.
I still
granted,
remember Randy
but-
Moss's first game.
Oof. That guy was just
live.
electric all the time.
Oh my god, yes. All right. So the other thing that we're going to point out is there was an impartial coin flip. My wife rolled dice, and I let Chris call odds or evens, and it wound up. Chris called, I believe, evens, or did you call
I
odds?
don't remember.
Whatever.
I don't-
Whatever he called, it wound up on the other one. So I have the first overall pick. So I will pick all the odd numbers. Chris will pick all the even numbers. We will be announcing our own picks in our own style. I'm going to go for more of the way they do it in the NFL draft. And then we're going to make a kind of an argument if we need to, or we think we need to, about why that player would go where we're putting them.
So I was gonna say, like in a lot of these cases, I imagine that most of the time neither one of us are gonna really argue too hard one way or the other to be like, no, that's a bad pick. There might be a couple where we're like, no, I don't agree, but I think most of the one, I imagine that we're mostly gonna be on similar terms or be able to at least mostly come to like, oh, okay, I can see why you picked that player.
100%. 100%. Okay. That being said, since I have the first overall pick, the Indianapolis Colts are on the clock, and with the first overall pick of the 2012 redraft, the Indianapolis Colts will select a quarterback from Wisconsin, Russell Wilson.
Boo, boo.
Now, originally they took Andrew Luck, but if you'll allow me to point out that if you look at their ratings head-to-head, and you look at everything of them head-to-head, Wilson comes out on top. Wilson also, objectively, percentile-wise, took more sacks through most of his career. He also threw for more yards per attempt and had more yards per completion. Also, he won the Super Bowl his third year in the league. His fourth year in the league, which would also be Luck's fourth year in the league, I will also point out that while he went to the Super Bowl, he lost, but they barely lost to a Patriots team that spanked the Colts 45-7. It wasn't even close. So against common opponents, they even were better. Russell Wilson was better. Now, you could say that Andrew Luck just got unlucky because the Colts had no offensive line. To which objectively I say, no. Honestly, Wilson looks like he got hit more, but that's because he was athletic and tried to scramble more. I also don't know that there was much of a passing game.
He took longer. So this is why I will argue that the offensive line does matter. Russell was able to extend his plays a lot longer with good offensive line. And that's why he got hit more often.
I don't remember watching Wilson and the Seahawks enough to know whether that offensive line was good or not.
It was pretty good.
So I'm not going to argue that point. I am going to say that he extended plays quite a bit, though.
He did. He held onto the ball.
And he also got hit a lot more.
He also ran it a lot more.
Well, I mean, even outside of that, if you look at the percentage of sacks per drop back, he toasts Luck every year. overall numbers, even after the first season, he toasts Luck almost every year. So I don't know that the offensive line was better. I also think Luck had a better receiver in T.Y. Hilton than I think he was better than Doug Baldwin, which is the only guy that Russell had for a while. You remember DK? He had what? Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin.
Both
And that's
pretty good players, by the
they
way.
were decent, but they weren't.
Lockett is considered really good, actually. So.
But I'm talking about the early years, and Lockett was.
Yeah. He got better as he got older, but he was still very good as a
Yes,
younger
he got
guy, too.
much better because he figured a lot of things out as he got older. But the point is, he's not DK Metcalf, which he has now, and he wasn't T.Y. Hilton back then, because you remember young T.Y. Hilton was a monster burner.
Listen, I'm not saying that it's a bad pick. I understand why you picked Russell Wilson. I just don't necessarily agree with the overall choice, but that's fine.
Yeah, I'm just, like I said, that's my argument for Wilson over Luck. I totally understand why some people would say I'm wrong, and I totally understand that Luck had a tremendous amount of upside, but I just think that with Wilson's ability to extend the play and move around the pocket, even with the bad offensive line that Indy supposedly had, I honestly think Wilson is the better pick at quarterback, and he certainly had the longer career. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been to a couple of Super Bowls. He certainly has had. You can't argue that it's a completely off the walls bullshit ass pick. So
no, of course not.
You know, it really is. I feel like this is a coin flip the same way everybody thought it was RG3 or Luck the first time.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah. Okay, so your turn now, sir. The second overall pick. You were on the clock.
Yep, that would be the Washington Commanders.
You can go with. You know what I did? I would say Skins.
The Washington Skins, yeah.
The Pigskins. Just call them the Pigskins if you want to.
The team from Washington, Team Washington, with the news that that Andrew Luck is still on the board. Of course, they're gonna draft Andrew Luck at the number 2 spot. Andrew Luck is, of course, from Stanford. Listen, here's the thing. This is why I actually don't want to argue against you picking Russell Wilson number 1, is because we already know what Andrew Luck at the Colts looks like. We already know what happens. 100 times out of 100 times, that's what's probably going to happen, right? So I'm more interested in seeing Andrew Luck at a different place and seeing if he could succeed somewhere else. And we already know that he had some success with Indy, so why can't he do the same thing at Washington? Now, granted, is Washington an any better team than Indy?
You could argue their line is worse.
Yeah.
Just knowing what happened to RG3, you could argue their line is worse.
But at the same time, as much I would love to see Andrew Luck go to pretty much any other team, but at the same time, this is in line for Washington. Washington, if given the opportunity, would have absolutely taken Andrew Luck at number 2.
Oh, 100%.
So they're going to take Andrew Luck at number 2.
No, I'm not saying that you're wrong. All right.
There we go. I don't think I need to argue much more for that.
Nope. All right. So now we have the third overall pick. The Cleveland Browns are on the clock. And looking at what the Browns needed that year, I have them marked down as needing a quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, a defensive tackle, or a free safety. And since there are still several good quarterbacks on the board, and quarterbacks that I think should be drafted high just based off of what...
Did you say corner or quarter?
Quarter.
I want to make sure I get...
Quarter.
Okay.
QB.
I wanted to make sure I got that right. That's all.
Quarterbacks who are on the board who I think could still potentially be drafted very high. I'm going to go ahead and move one up that was originally drafted a little further down.
Okay.
So, with the third overall pick, the Cleveland Browns will select from Texas A&M University quarterback Ryan Tannehill.
Interesting choice. Okay.
You can't say that he's been a bad quarterback.
No,
He
no.
is, if nothing else, a great field general quarterback. He gets the balls to his receivers well. He's been a decent quarterback. He knows how to hold an offense together. He knows how to manage a game. He doesn't throw a lot of interceptions when he doesn't have to. With the right tools around him and a good running game behind him, I think that he winds up being a very, very competent quarterback for Cleveland. The original pick they had here, by the way, would only play for them one season. He'd have a good first season and then would completely fall apart. So I think that was a waste of a pick.
So, I guess, so you're weighing up RG3 basically likely still being too injury prone to be picked at this point. So I assume that's why you didn't pick him over.
Yes, I think
Okay.
he's just too.
Even if playing in a different system, you're still too worried
Even
about
playing
that
in a
injury.
different
I get
system
it.
right
Okay.
now, just based on what I saw.
No, I totally get it. He was very injury prone, which is
Yeah,
why I'm
he
like,
got
even
hit
in other
because
systems, it's
he
hard to
ran
say.
around
Yeah.
a lot. Like, I think he'd be better. Personally, he'd be better on a team that still needs a quarterback, but that already had a
Sure.
halfway decent line in place, so he didn't have to
Yeah.
run as often.
Yeah.
That way,
I
he
don't
could
disagree with
run
that.
when he needed to, rather than for his life.
I don't disagree with that. I get it. I get it.
There are some other teams further down who I think he would fit better at.
Yeah, we'll see which one of us gets to him first, depending on
Yeah,
depending
totally.
on what we think what the team needs. That's gonna be interesting. I don't know who's gonna get to him first,
We'll find out.
or which team's gonna get him. Yeah. All right. Well, that's fair. That's another QB off the board. That doesn't leave too many QBs left on my board that were considered any good. So
I still have 3.
that's that's exactly how many I have.
Yay!
What a coinky dink. All right. So that puts us to pick number 4 of round 1, which belonged to the Minnesota Vikings. So, my thinking here going through it is I don't know exactly what player I'm going to pick, but I know Minnesota needed, according to my research, a wide receiver, an offensive tackle, and a running back. And the running back was mostly due to the thoughts of needing a good secondary behind Peterson.
Yeah, so you don't really need one, but
No,
I mean, a secondary
it's good to
back
have,
behind
especially
Peterson.
because it was coming off of Peterson's pretty decent injury,
Mhm.
so they wanted, so it's not necessarily a high priority, which is why I think I'm completely wiping that off the table. I don't think I need a running back now. And honestly, even if I can't get one of the top 5 that are on my list, there were other decent running backs in this point, so I'm not too worried about getting one of those. So now I'm looking down to offensive tackle and wide receiver. Which one is more likely a needed option? Which one would help more beneficially? And so I'm thinking, how good was the defense at the time? How good was the offense? Offense was running strictly through Peterson, mostly because they didn't trust or I guess they didn't know what they had at quarterback with
Ponder.
Ponder at the time. So of course, at the same time, to be fair, we didn't give him a lot of good players to work with either at wide receiver. So I'm kind of actually I'm gonna pull an interesting twist here. And at pick 4, the Minnesota Vikings are going to select T.Y. Hilton. Gonna pick T.Y. Hilton. Hold on, let me see. I gotta pull up my positions so I have them. I want to make sure that I have him.
Florida International.
Florida International. There it is.
Yep.
Florida International. T.Y. Hilton.
Originally picked round 3, 92nd overall.
I think he's better than that. Obviously, you look at his career with the Colts, he's obviously fantastic. The other reason why I went with wide receiver is because while there are only a couple good tackles on the list, I think there aren't a lot of teams that need them, and I'm weighing up the opportunity that there's a potential that Minnesota can still get a tackle late in the first round with their last pick in the first.
Potentially, yes.
But I could be wrong. This could be a mess up. But we already know how it played out going with MacLeod, which is who I would have picked if I would have went tackle.
We do.
So I wanted to see a different change and see if we would have gone more offensively, how that would have worked out.
Oh, 100%.
And out of all the wide receivers that were available during this, I think T.Y. Hilton is arguably the best.
That makes perfect sense to me. Um, okay, so at fifth overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars are on the board, and I have them needing a wide receiver, an offensive guard, and an outside linebacker. And being that there are not very many wide receivers on the board that I think were any good in this draft, and being that they did actually take a wide receiver who was considered good at the time, but just had too many problems with weed and alcohol. I think they're going to look at a different wide receiver this time, and with the fifth overall pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars will select from the University of South Carolina wide receiver Alshon Jeffrey.
I'm going with Alshon Jeffrey. Okay. Yeah,
Originally
fair.
picked round 245th overall. Honestly, he played very well in Chicago for a while, and then he went to Philly and he didn't play as well. But I do believe he won a Super Bowl with them.
Yes, he
Yes,
was on that team.
he was on that team. He did kind of slow down precipitously pretty quickly.
I mean, he wasn't like one of the like out of all the wide receivers that are pretty much left that are on the list. They were all kind of that way, where they had a couple good seasons and petered off pretty quick. I think only T.Y. Hilton and arguably one other on this list had careers that lasted pretty decently and are either still going or have recently completed and are very good. Or you know,
I mean, you
know what I'm
could throw
saying.
Josh Gordon on there.
Yeah, that he was the other one I was thinking of.
But
T.Y.
Josh
Hilton and
Gordon,
Josh Gordon were
the
the
problem
main
that I
two.
have with Josh Gordon is we know how that career played out, and he had the same problems that Justin Blackmon, who's the
He
pick
did,
they actually
but he had
took.
far more success though.
He did, and
And that's why I'm saying that if you're gonna look at it, those two, in my opinion, are probably the best. The only downside for Josh Gordon is knowing that personality, and you have to pair him with the right team.
Yeah, and I don't think Jacksonville was it based
God,
on
no.
based on what happened with Blackmon.
no.
Yeah, no. So
It's the
that's
same thing,
why
like
I wouldn't
pick. It's like the same thing with like Cleveland. Cleveland, I would not choose for Gordon to go to. Like
No,
Cleveland has
no,
a
no,
history
no,
of
no,
having
no,
a
no,
hard
no.
time controlling players.
So that's why I chose where I chose. I think
Yeah.
putting him in the right system with the right people, I absolutely think that he could thrive, and maybe they would get him the help he needs, and he would stay in the league a lot longer.
Yeah, probably.
So that being said, Alshon Jeffrey off the board. He did have a couple of good seasons in Chicago. I'd be interested to see if he played in Jacksonville and he was the premier wide receiver for them, how that changes his trajectory.
Well, it would have been far more interesting for Jacksonville too, because Jacksonville, if I recall, had just come off of a really good season.
I believe
Or,
so, yes. And
yeah.
their thing was when they took Blackmon, they were hoping he was going to be the stud for their next offensive
Exactly.
outburst, and it didn't happen. It
No.
fell apart very quickly because Blackmon
Especially he didn't play a lot because of all the issues.
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
Now,
With Jeffrey
now I think
playing
Jeffrey, I think Jeffrey isn't like a star number one, but I think he would have been a good enough pick early on for them to start number one to possibly transition to getting a different number one later down the road.
They didn't need a world breaker wide receiver. They
No.
needed somebody who could catch the ball, and then they could play action out.
Yeah.
Because at the time, you might remember, they had a running back named Maurice Jones-Drew.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, I know what you're saying. That's why I'm saying that, like, he wasn't like the big star number one that you'd want, but he's definitely was good enough until you could get a star one. No questions about that. So I think that would have made the Jacksonville franchise take a completely different turn. They probably would have had a higher up quicker than they ultimately ended up doing.
Oh, 100%. I think you're correct.
You can see how long it took Jacksonville to finally get any success after
yes, I think you're 100%
So.
correct. Okay.
this. All right. So we're going on to pick 6, which belongs to the Dallas Cowboys. All right. So
The
according
Tony Romo
to-
Cowboys.
Yeah, according to what I got, Dallas needs a guard, defensive tackle, and a strong safety. Interesting.
They're really weren't that many good strong safeties. In fact, there were no really good strong safeties.
There were no really strong safeties, so they couldn't really go that way. They could go with just a safety, but I don't know if that would really work the way they would want to. So I'm imagining they're probably going to go either guard or defensive tackle.
There's some really good ones there. Huh.
Yep. Now as to where they end up going, questionable, right? Just give me a second. I kind of want to narrow down which way I'm thinking here. Man, there is some good options here, actually. Do I go with the obvious pick? And there's one that I think is really obvious.
There is a couple of there are two I think really obvious.
Yeah.
Ones.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't know if I want to go with. Yeah, I think I'm probably gonna do it. So just make sure I got this right. Here we go. For the number 6 pick, Dallas will actually end up choosing a defensive tackle out of Mississippi State, Fletcher Cox.
That's the one I figured that was.
Who was originally picked by Philly at the 12th spot. I just think it makes sense. Fletcher Cox played very, very well for Philly, and I mean, it just, you know what? It just makes sense. Dallas needs some of that help. Get on over there, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That adds to that defensive line, and that he would be a holding terror there with DeMarcus Ware.
Exactly. I don't think there's a question of if it makes sense or not. It's just about that Dallas ended up picking him. I think originally Dallas ended up going with a defensive back, if I remember right.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I'm going to put up
Morris Claiborne.
Who also, at the time, he was coming out of LSU, and he wasn't considered to be bad, but he never ever lived up.
But he never got to the level that they were definitely expecting at that pick. So
he also played next to the Honey Badger.
Yes, that's true. So I think ultimately, based upon the knowledge of who we know Morris Claiborne ends up turning into, I think this is a better pick overall.
100%. I'm also going to point out that makes a lot of sense. I will be putting above on the stream up where people can see it. I will put the original pick, and then below it, I will put the new pick and where they were originally picked. That's something I do plan on doing. Nice. So that way people can see they can compare. All right. That being said, we're now on pick 7. And pick 7 belongs to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are on the clock. According to the research I did, they have needs fucking everywhere. I have them down as needing a quarterback, a center, a defensive end, an outside linebacker, a cornerback, and a strong safety. They pretty much need help everywhere.
Pretty much.
Especially on the defensive side of the ball right now. That being said, I think it would be really, really hard not to take a guy that actually wound up there. I'm just going to grab him a lot earlier because I think if I don't, he's not going to be around. And I do think that he's been the identity of their linebacking core for quite some period of time. With that being said, from the University of Nebraska, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will take outside linebacker Lavonte David.
Yeah. You know, it's not a bad pick. It makes sense. Um, I honestly, it makes sense now. It makes sense then.
They originally took him in the second round. He slipped all the way to the second round, but knowing what we know Levante David becomes, there's no way he lasts that long.
No, he would not last not with you and me picking. There's no way he would.
There's no way. No. Definitely not. So grabbing him here is something I think they need. I considered looking at RG3 for them, but I was like, no, there's still too much of a mess offensively for me to think that makes any sense. Kirk Cousins is a decent quarterback, but I don't think that pick makes sense. They need a lot more help.
Not here.
Looking
Especially
at what
not
they
at
needed.
This, not at this pick,
But looking at what they needed, most of their help is needed on the defensive side of the ball, so I'm going to go ahead and pick defense for them.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Alrighty.
All right, so we're moving on to pick number 8, which belongs to the Miami Dolphins. Now, the question is, what do I do with the Dolphins? Because we know they need a QB. We know they need a wide receiver. We know they need a defensive end. They obviously picked QB here, who is no longer actually on the board at this point, which was Ryan Tannehill.
He's gone.
He has gone to the Cleveland Browns now. So that makes me question, do I pick a QB here? Is there a QB that I think is good enough to be put here that the Dolphins need? Because they desperately need a QB because they really don't have one at all. So even knowing what I know now, I think the Dolphins are desperate enough to pick the quarterback out of Baylor, RG3.
No,
even if they only get 2 or 3 good years out of him, that's what they really need right now.
But I think with him going to Miami, I think they had a much better line, and I think they
did. I think it makes more sense.
I think
they have a better chance of him.
I think he's protected a lot better. Yeah. I don't think he's got great numbers his first year.
And if you remember, Miami was more of a running team, so being able to use RG3 as an option player, even though it didn't happen a lot then, they could have taken advantage of that, and he could have been what Lamar is now, except for, I think, arguably better, because I think he had better physical attributes.
No, I agree 100%. I'm not going to be angry about that pick at all. That makes a ton of sense for me. I like that a lot. So I was wondering if he was going to last past Miami or not, and I was wondering whether you were going to go there or whether you were going to go with Kirk Cousins.
I thought about Cousins, but I still think that's too high up. I think Miami would have looked
I agree with you.
The high physicality of RG3 and wouldn't have let him slip past him.
All right. So with the 9th overall pick, we have the Panthers. I have the Carolina Panthers as needing a wide receiver, an offensive guard, a defensive tackle, an outside linebacker, a middle linebacker, a quarterback, and a free safety.
Listen, just stab me in the heart now, because if you pick who I think you're going to pick.
No, actually, I'm not.
Oh, you're not?
I'm going to pick exactly who they picked, because you can't say that it was a wrong pick. And
that's what hurts me. That's why I said go ahead and stab me in the heart, because I knew you were going to pick Luke Kuechly.
Yep.
That guy is so good.
Out of Boston College, I will keep them picking Luke Kuechly. There's absolutely no way Luke Kuechly makes it past this team.
That's the only reason I'm hurt is because I was hoping to be able to pick him with it. I have a team a couple spaces down that I wanted to give him to.
Oh yeah, but Luke Kuechly does not go past this pick at all. No. Luke Kuechly is a boss. He's a beast. He's a monster. I thought about Harrison Smith because that would help their secondary, but no. Luke Kuechly still has to stay here. He was the heart of their defense on that team. He transformed that defense, and it started with Luke fucking Kuechly. So
it really did.
There you go.
I agree. All right. So moving on to pick number 10, which belonged to the Buffalo Bills. They need, according to what I looked up, a wide receiver, an outside tackle, or offensive tackle. Sorry, outside tackle. I'm dumb. Offensive tackle, and a middle linebacker. So who did they end up picking with their 10th overall pick? Stephen Gilmore, a defensive back.
You gonna
that's
keep
who
him?
they ended. No, but that's who they ended up picking originally. Listen, Stephon Gilmore is a great player, but based upon what they need on paper, it didn't make sense. Like, to me, it didn't make sense. I maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm dumb. But that's just my opinion. I think there was definitely a better pick at this spot. And I think there is absolutely no question who I'm going to actually take at this spot because they need a middle linebacker. Who's the last middle linebacker who's really good on this list? Bobby Wagner from Utah State. No question on that. I think he just makes more sense than Stephon Gilmore for what they need on defense. While Stephon Gilmore's a great player, I think Bobby Wagner is far more what they need.
Okay. We are on to pick number 11 now, which is the Kansas City Chiefs. According to what I saw, they need a wide receiver, a tight end, a defensive end, an inside linebacker, and a cornerback. There are no more good inside linebackers, so we can cross that off. There are no more really good wide receivers that I would want to put in Kansas City at this point.
Okay.
I don't know if Josh Gordon fits Kansas City at this point.
Okay, arguably at this point, you might be right, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I don't remember who the coach was at this point, and I don't remember if they had the structure.
However, there is one other player that I think you could put on the Chiefs right now that would be good still.
There are a couple that I'm going to put on the Chiefs that could be really good.
No, but I'm saying out of a wide receiver, there's one more that I think I would put maybe at this spot.
Maybe, but I don't think that they would be better than the defensive ends or cornerbacks on this list.
I'm not going to disagree with you there because, I didn't do enough research on that team. But I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised.
So with that being said, looking at what they need and knowing that there is a fairly good pick sitting there from the University of South Carolina, the Chiefs will select cornerback Stephon Gilmore.
Stephon Gilmore, yep.
I mean, it was really between him and Josh Norman.
Well, that's fair.
As to who I wanted to put there. There were also some defensive end picks that I could have grabbed there, but I think securing their secondary at this point, I think Gilmore's going to be the guy in their secondary for years to come. And if I remember right, they also had Eric. At this point in time, they also had Eric Berry from Tennessee. That was just like that forms a shutdown completely in their secondary. And then the next year they would get. I think the next year or the year after, they would wind up with the Honey Badger.
Right.
So, I mean, that just completely... or no, he went to Arizona first. My bad. But the point is, they had some great talent on that team in the secondary, and I think adding Gilmore to that is just an absolute... It turns them into a defensive monstrosity.
Right.
Originally, they picked Dante Poe from Memphis.
Dontari Poe, yeah.
Dontari Poe, thank you.
Dontari Poe. Wasn't a bad player in his own way.
No, absolutely not.
Definitely
and
not
it made sense within their 3-4 scheme because he's a big, high-end, stuffer. But I don't... There were better ideas.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're going on to pick number 12, which belongs
12.
to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I have them needing a defensive tackle, an outside linebacker, and a tight end. So what do I want to do at this point? There's a couple of options, obviously, still on the list.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know which way I want to go. Options. So many options. Who do I go with here? Ah, man. I'm thinking... about going outside linebacker. That's what I'm thinking off the top of my head.
There's quite a few of them.
There is. But... I think there's one that I want to take that I think is far better than the rest. Well, I don't know. It's far better than the rest is debatable. But for outside linebacker, I think there's one that's really, really good. and he is from Alabama. It is the outside linebacker, Donta Hightower.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
just
not a
think it
bad
makes
pick.
sense. Looking at it for a while, it just made the most sense. I mean, I could have gone that way, or I mean, there was a couple others. Like I could have gone Melvin Ingram, but I didn't want to go Melvin Ingram at this point. Like it
He's
didn't
not
make
bad.
sense for the team. It just didn't make sense for the team.
No,
I think Donta Hightower is just
I agree.
better player at this point.
Demario Davis would also be up there. He was a pretty good player too.
Yeah, Demario Davis I could have put up there too, but
I think
I think
Hightower. I
knowing
think
what we
Hightower's
got from
better than Davis.
Hightower,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think knowing what we end up getting with Hightower, I just think he ends up matching up a little bit better in this
I
spot.
agree with that. I 100% agree with that. Okay. So that brings us to the 13th overall pick, which belongs to the Arizona Cardinals. I have them needing a quarterback, a wide receiver, a tight end, a center, a guard, and an outside linebacker. And at this point, I think they're going to address the need that they have at quarterback. So, from Michigan State, the quarterback, Kirk Cousins.
So the funny thing is, if you didn't take him, there was a team. I had a couple picks down that I was looking at possibly doing.
I
it
did
for.
too. There's a couple of teams that I had further down that would have
Yeah.
snagged him very easily.
Yeah.
But I think knowing what they know and what they get with Cousins, despite the fact, that Kirk, I still think he's a lot better than anything else they have at this point, and I think he winds up
Yeah,
being
I don't
better
even
than
know
anything
who.
else they get at this point.
I don't even know who did Arizona end up.
I don't even remember
having
that
a
at this
QB.
point.
Yeah.
I don't even think it matters. This
But I
might
think
have been during the
Bradford was still with the Rams, wasn't he? So it wasn't Bradford. I don't know who it was.
No, Bradford never played in Arizona. I think this was during the
No, I know.
Was this during
But
the
I'm
Matt
saying,
Leinart era? I think this was right after.
was this right after what's his name
Warner
left?
retired?
Warner retired. Is this? But this is either Warner's last year or it was right after.
I think this was Warner. I think this was right after Warner's last year. If you want me to be. Uh,
Either way, honestly, even if they have Warner now, it still makes
yeah,
sense
this
knowing
is
that
would
he's
be
leaving
right
soon.
after that because I'm trying to remember when my last deployment was because that was
Okay.
when they made the Super Bowl with Warner and they played the Steelers
And almost won.
and almost won. Holy crap! I really wanted them to win that.
Yeah.
Anyway, no. So I think this would have been one of Warner's last years. If it wasn't his last year, it's right around the corner. I think
That's
this
what I'm saying.
just
It makes
just
sense for
after
them to
his last
still one way
season.
or another.
But yeah, no, I think knowing what you get out of Kirk, I think this carries you into the future because they had a revolving door at quarterback for a little while after this.
Now, my worry with Kirk though is remember he did sit behind RG3 for a couple of years before he went out.
Oh, yeah,
Putting him
he
out
did,
this early
but
would that be a problem? You think?
I don't know, and that is a worry, but I don't know what you'll get out of him. But I do think that whatever you get out of him is better than what you had.
True. I'll give you that. Okay.
So
That's fair.
But that's
That's
where
fair.
we're gonna go. We're gonna go with Kirk.
All right. So that was you had 13. So
13.
we're on to pick 14, which belonged to the St. Louis Rams, who are now actually the LA Rams.
Yep.
But they belong to the Rams, and the Rams need an offensive tackle, a guard, a defensive tackle, and a wide receiver. Hmm. Man. Honestly, this is gonna hurt a little bit, but the Rams really need to protect Bradford because I think they have Bradford at this point. And I think they had a hard time protecting him. I think that's who they have as their QB at this point.
Mhm.
Pretty sure it is. And if you remember, he does have some type of injury issues. So it does make sense for them to be picking an offensive tackle at this spot.
I just crossed him off the list.
And there's one that's really good who ultimately will no longer continue falling down the list. He is from USC, and he is MacLeod. He is by far the best offensive tackle out of this draft. I don't think there's any questions about that. Not to say that some of the other guys aren't good, but MacLeod was definitely by far the best. And it just makes sense for what the Rams really need at this spot. Who did they end up originally picking? I think they ended up picking a defensive tackle. Michael Brockers, which not bad pick, but not the correct pick for what they needed at the time, in my opinion. So.
All right. So that being said, we're gonna go ahead and look now to. It's the 15th overall pick. This will be the Seattle Seahawks, and according to what I see, they needed a quarterback, an offensive guard, a middle linebacker, and a defensive tackle. Being that the middle linebackers are all kind of dried out, there are some good defensive tackles, but I'm going to go a different route here, because they obviously didn't take a quarterback until the third round originally, so they're not that worried about it. So I'm going to look at a different side of things here and take and build a little something. So out of Stanford University, offensive guard David DeCastro.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
He was a
It's
very
funny because I thought about taking him earlier, to be a honest with you.
But I absolutely.
didn't,
But he's a very solid offensive guard. He played for a lot of years, and he doesn't allow a lot of sacks. So I think this is Pete Carroll's first year. I think building that line into a powerhouse line and protecting whoever you eventually get as your quarterback, even if you lure in a free agency for a year or go with like what he did this year, which is just like go with nobody and hope something hits the wall, which they totally could do. But I think building that offensive line to protect your quarterback, I think, is going to be important. Also, I believe they had Marshawn Lynch, so I don't really think it matters who throws the ball. And having David DeCastro start blocking for Marshawn Lynch, I think is going to be fucking just open massive holes for Lynch. Yep. So you're going to get massive beast quakes.
That's fair.
So I don't think that I need to argue that too hard. On to pick 16.
I don't disagree with you. We're going on to pick 16, which belongs to the New York Jets. The Jets are notorious for being terrible at drafting early round, but that is not me. I am not that. The New York Jets really need a defensive end, an outside linebacker, a safety, and a wide receiver. You really need a defensive end. There's one really good still left on the board. You're definitely taking him. His name is Chandler Jones. We're taking Chandler Jones out of Syracuse University. I don't think there's a question as to why I took Chandler Jones. The guy is a goddamn beast at defensive ends. And if you need to make the Jets a good team, stacking up that defense going to make it look way better than it was.
100%, because I think at this time they still had Revis.
Yes.
And that just, now all of a sudden you've got a guy that's going to harry the fucking quarterback and force him into bad throws that Revis is just going to pick off and make you look stupid for.
Exactly.
You don't need to sell me on Chandler Jones. Chandler Jones
no, I don't think I had to sell anyone on Chandler
No,
Jones.
you shouldn't have to.
The fact that he fell down this far is kind of funny because there wasn't too many teams above that actually really needed defensive ends as badly as
the Chiefs were one of the only ones, and I decided to go with cornerback over defensive end.
Exactly.
And that's literally all it was. So the next team on the list is the 17th overall pick, which belongs to the Cincinnati Bengals, who I believe at this time they still had Carson Palmer.
Did they still have Palmer? Or did they move on at that point in 2012? Would they have had...
Did they trade him off to the Raiders at that point?
Would they have traded him off at that point?
I don't remember. I'll have to look it up later. The point is, the Bengals, what I have them needing is a halfback, an outside linebacker, an offensive guard, and a center. So, here's what I'm going to do. Out of the University of Miami, running back Lamar Miller. Let's fill that hole.
They had Andy Dalton in 2012, bro.
That's right. They had Andy Dalton and A.J. Green.
They had Andy Dalton and A.J. Green at that point.
Now, there's the Red Rifle, and you can't say that he was a horrible quarterback.
He was not a bad QB. No.
He was very much a game manager, but you add somebody like Lamar Miller who can run and catch the ball out of the backfield. It gives Dalton another target. Plus, it takes some pressure off of A.J. Green. To have something like that floating around out there. Lamar Miller actually, because he played for Miami for a while, and he was a very solid, good quarterback for quite some period of time. I think putting him on Cincinnati here, I think that changes Cincinnati's trajectory immensely. I think they wind up being a lot better than what they were. And I think taking that pressure off of Green to have to make everything happen, suddenly you have a running back that can start making things happen and catching the ball out of the backfield, and now you add this other weapon. I think it changes the complexion of that team, and I think it changes their trajectory entirely.
I don't disagree with you. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. All right. So moving on to pick 18, which belonged to the San Diego Chargers at the time, which are now the LA Chargers. What do the Chargers need? The Chargers need a guard, a tackle, a running back, and a cornerback. Interesting. And looking at who they picked is an interesting thing too, because I'm not going to pick the same pick. I don't think that makes sense for what they need right now. I think. Yeah, I think I'm doing it. I think I'm doing exactly what you think I'm going to do. I'm picking a defensive back out of Notre Dame University, Harrison Smith.
I didn't think you were going to go there. I thought you were going to go from Coastal Carolina.
Nope, I am going for Harrison Smith. Now, listen, is it exactly what they need? No. But I think it's far better than what they have. And they need more defense. So getting another free safety, another defensive back, he's not a corner, obviously, but he's still very good. It's not going to fill up the cornerback slot that they need, but there really wasn't a lot of good corners, in my opinion. There were some, but I think Harrison Smith is just a better player than most of the corners that were available. Just a personal thought. You might disagree with me, but that's fine. I think it makes sense.
Okay. Well,
I mean, I could have gone Josh Norman. Listen, that was the other option I thought about. But
that's where I thought you were going.
But I think Harrison Smith is just too good of a player to let slip that far down at this point.
Okay, well,
I could definitely see the Chargers doing that if they knew how good of a player he was.
Okay, I can't say that you were incorrect. Yeah. I kind of like that idea. Okay. That leaves us to pick 19, which is the Chicago Bears. The Bears need a wide receiver, an offensive guard, an outside linebacker, and a strong safety. So, looking at what we have,
man, I don't know if there's any strong safeties, is there?
No, there are no strong safeties, so we can cross that entirely off. However, at this point in time, I'm going to grab out of Arkansas State University, outside linebacker, Demario Davis.
You're going Demario Davis, okay.
I'm going Demario Davis over Melvin Ingram. I just think I like Davis a little better than Ingram. Ingram had some good stats, and he was a good linebacker. I think Demario Davis was a much more solid linebacker.
I thought Ingram was a defensive end.
I think he's played both. He was drafted as an outside linebacker.
Are you sure?
Yes. 100%. Melvin Ingram, who was that's from South Carolina, right? No, he was drafted as a defensive end. Hold on.
Yeah. Unless it's Melvin Ingram III, yeah, position DE, according to Pro Football Reference. By the way, that's the one I'm on.
I looked at it because remember what I told you I got all my stuff from?
I know. I'm looking at Pro Football Focus.
I did not get my stuff from Pro Football Reference.
Well, that's where I'm getting mine from right now. So that's all I'm saying.
Wikipedia.
They have him listed as a
Wikipedia,
defensive end.
he's listed as a linebacker.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
That's why I listed him as a linebacker. And in fact,
He must have switched.
Wikipedia, Melvin Ingram III is an American football outside linebacker for the Miami Dolphins.
He must have. Yeah, I was gonna say he must have been drafted as a DE and then became an outside linebacker.
Hold on.
That would make sense, actually. Yes. So San Diego, he played in 2012 and 2013 as a defensive end. Then he played outside linebacker with them in 2014, 2015, 2016.
I think he was drafted as an outside. I think he was drafted. I think he would be considered these days. They would call him edge.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is because he goes from DE to outside linebacker to right defensive end, then back to DE, then back to linebacker for Miami.
Yeah, so he goes all over the place. He's an edge rusher. Yeah. He's a rusher. That's his whole thing.
He's a rusher basically.
Demario Davis, I think
he can also he can also line in the backfield. That's what a linebacker also does. So he can do.
But I think Demario Davis overall is a more solid outside linebacker style character that I think can be used a lot better in this particular situation for Chicago. I think he adds to that monstrous of the midway type of feel, and Davis I think he's going to be a solid guy on that field for quite some time.
That's fair.
So,
I don't
20th
disagree with
overall.
So 20th overall, we have the Tennessee Titans, who need a defensive end, a cornerback, and a guard. Now, they ultimately ended up picking a wide receiver at their spot, which makes no sense in my opinion. I don't know why they did that. However, I'm left with an option of going corner or defensive end. Which one do I think they need more than the other, or which one do I think has, or what player do I think has a bigger impact? And I think there is one player that does give them more impact than I think some of the others. And I am actually going to go with the guy out of South Carolina, Melvin Ingram. Just because he can be flexed. He can play both a defensive end and a linebacker. I think that helps Tennessee quite a bit. Because in fact, they do need a defensive end. While they don't need a linebacker, I think having that ability to flex them around will give them a little bit more options.
Damn you took the guy I was just going to grab. because at number 21, we have the New England Patriots,
yeah.
And they need a defensive end and an outside linebacker. And I would have loved to have seen what Belichick could do with Ingram. Oh my God, that's frightening. But you've left me with a different choice. So they need either a defensive end or an outside linebacker. And in this case, I'm going to go with the defensive end, who had actually several good years on a different team that confounded the out of Belichick a couple of times. So, again, from Miami, defensive end, Olivier Vernon.
I didn't even have him on my list, so that came out of nowhere.
He's a Pro Bowler, and he actually had lots of,
He was decent, but he was definitely not on my radar as a player that I would have picked here, but I think for the Patriots, it does make sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense for the Patriots, because really I only had them needing two things. Defensive end, outside linebacker, best player available. That was really what it is. They originally took Donta Hightower. No, they took him another couple of picks later.
I think they took Chandler Jones first.
I think they took Chandler Jones here.
Which, honestly, great pick. If he would have still been available, that would have been amazing.
Olivier Vernon. So just so that everybody kind of understands why I went that direction, if you look at his actual numbers, like his rookie year, he played in all 16 games, but he didn't start a single one of them, had 3.5 sacks. His second year, he started 13 games, put up 11.5 sacks. 6.5, 7.5, 8.5. The dude ended his career in 2020 with 63.5 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
The man was an absolute monster. He had 300 career-wise, 389 combined tackles, 157 QB hits. Yeah, I'd love to see what Bill Belichick does with that monster. I think that fits a Bill Belichick scheme very, very well, and I think Belichick just turns him into an absolute beast.
That's fair.
All right.
So now we're going to
number 22.
22 pick, which belongs to the Cleveland Browns. Interesting, because you already picked their QB for them.
I did.
Which ended up being
Tannehill.
Who? Tannehill, Ryan Tannehill. That's right. I was gonna say Kirk Cousins. You just did it recently, so I know it wasn't him.
Tannehill.
Tannehill. Yeah. So ultimately, I think they were probably. So they ended up picking a QB at that spot because they ended up picking earlier up a running back. I think that was the wrong choice. I think that obviously picking a QB where they picked a running back was obviously the smarter choice, like you did. However, I do believe giving more offensive weapons makes sense. So the choice is, do I go for a running back or a wide receiver? I'm actually going to end up, I think, going wide receiver. The question is now, which wide receiver do I go with? There's a couple of good options still left on the board, but I think there's one that I do like more than the rest. And it's not by like a huge margin, right? But based upon what's already left on the field, I think it makes sense for the Cleveland Browns to choose the guy out of Rutgers, Mohamed Sanu. I think
He would have
it
had a good
makes
career.
sense. Yeah, I think it makes sense. He's going to be put on a Browns team that's already starting to shape up from this draft to look pretty good. I think giving Tannehill a good, solid number one or possibly number two, depending on how you see Sanu, but giving him another solid option to throw to is certainly good. I could have gone running back, but I just thought Sanu fit better in that situation based upon what was available for running backs. I don't have a problem with what the running backs have to offer, but I don't like any of them as much as I think I like Sanu, personally. I think Sanu just brings more to the table for Cleveland at this point.
All right.
But that's a personal preference, obviously.
No, that makes sense. 23 is the Detroit Lions. I have them needing an offensive tackle, a wide receiver, an outside linebacker, and a cornerback. Being that a lot of that is depleted at this point, I am going to go with a very obvious pick at this point, or at least something that I think is an obvious pick. So, the Lions are going to secure their secondary, and out of Coastal Carolina, they will take the cornerback, Josh Norman.
Josh Norman, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's fair.
I'm going to keep him in blue.
Sense. It makes sense.
Except silver and blue, and not black and blue.
Not black and blue, yeah. It makes sense. It makes sense. Though, to be fair, what they ended up picking at that spot originally, not a bad choice. Not a bad pick, what they originally had. They originally had Riley Reef there. A pretty good tackle.
See, and so the problem
He's a
that
solid tackle. He's not great. He's a solid tackle, though.
He was not worthy of a first-round pick. Second or third. Personally.
I could argue him late first, and I think around the 23rd pick, a little lower, maybe 25th or less, I could definitely still see it.
Just having watched
because there
him
isn't
in
that many good
Minnesota, I was
tackles.
not impressed.
He actually played pretty well. He wasn't great, but he wasn't the worst component, and he got better as the seasons went on. To be fair, but
Anyway.
I think he is compared to what other if you really need a tackle, he's certainly
if you
get
really
a lot
need
worse.
one, but considering there are better players available at this point.
Yes, that's why I'm saying if you really need a tackle and you don't really have any other positions you want to fill.
If there wasn't anything else available, but there was, so that's where we went.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying I don't think what they picked was necessarily a bad pick, but there was definitely better picks. Okay, so we're moving on to
24.
the 24th pick, which belongs to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have them needing an inside linebacker, a guard, a defensive tackle, and a weird choice, but somebody listed them as needing a potential QB to sit behind Roethlisberger. Obviously, we know how much longer he ended up playing, but people were worried about his potential injuries.
Yes, at that point, and also certain off-the-field issues.
Exactly. However, I think I'm going to do something weird. I'm going to do something really, really weird and off the wall. I'm actually not going to pick a player that's on their needed positions.
Oh, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. I swear to God, if you take who I think you're going to take,
there's one player that I think just makes sense here. In my personal opinion, because this player needs a strong coach in their life. And I think that there's only one or two teams that could really do that properly. and it is a player out of Utah, Josh Gordon, wide receiver.
Utah.
Yeah, he's out of Utah.
I thought he was Baylor.
No, he played at least his last year in Utah. At least according to Pro Football Reference. I'm only going off of that.
Okay.
It might be Baylor, but it says Utah according to this. So, either way, I think while you could argue based upon what I've already said earlier, it doesn't make sense because they don't really need him that bad. At the same time, knowing what he can be, you give him a strong coach that the Steelers got. I just think you could see some interesting things there. That's all.
I disagree with this pick entirely.
Okay, that's fine.
Not because of the coach, because of the locker room culture at this point. And I don't think you're thinking that through. Do you know who they had on their team at this point? Do you know who was in that wide receiver room?
Yes, I do.
Who?
I don't. Yeah, they had at that point they had AJ Brown, right?
Antonio Brown.
Antonio Brown, sorry, Antonio, not AJ.
They also had another guy in there, Plaxico Burress.
Yeah.
Who? What did he do?
He was who he was.
Exactly. And looking at the player that he was, I don't. I think that still.
I understand what you're saying. It could, but we also do know that there are potentials there with this coach being able to fix players because he has in the past.
See,
does it always work? No. And I would even argue that he was the only coach that could even handle Antonio Brown for as long as he did. So
no, I disagree with you because where I was going to do was pick him next at the 25th pick, which is the New England Patriots again.
Because he was the other option I could have seen him go to, but those were the only two coaches I would have done.
Belichick and Brady, I think, would have been able to kept him under rein a lot better, and especially the culture around New England, I think, was a lot better than the culture in Pittsburgh.
Because that worked with Antonio Brown.
That was...
making a point. If you're going to argue with that, he was at New England.
No, they didn't. They didn't have him in New England. They had him in New England for, like, a week.
Yeah, because he ended up being a giant pitch. They couldn't handle him.
But again, he'd already learned all of those behaviors by that point. Josh Gordon would be a young.
He was always like that. I just think that the guys at the Steelers were able to rein it in.
Kicked in the fucking face. That's a whole.
Yeah, maybe that's possible. That's
he got kicked in
thing.
the face on a return, or tried to tackle a return, or
no,
something.
He kicked somebody else in the face.
Oh yeah, but he got concussed somewhere actually in something, and I think.
Oh, wasn't it when he got? No, it was during one of those playoff games where he got fucking clotheslined.
Yeah.
Remember that? He got clotheslined and he fell directly on the top of his fucking head.
Yeah. And wasn't it by, what's his name? The outside linebacker from Cincinnati who always got penalized. Vontez Perfect.
Yeah, it was. It was perfect.
As soon as I said it, I went, yes! That guy. All right, then.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand you wanting him at New England. I think it's a risk to take him at Pittsburgh, but I am curious to see. Those are the only two coaches who could do it. And you can't disagree with me that those are the only two coaches that could have done it.
No, not really. I can't. So here's what I'm going to do now. Seeing as how we got the Patriots next, and the Patriots kind of fulfilled that slot on the defense that they needed with Olivier Vernon, I'm going to go ahead and take maybe not a best player available, but a very Belichick player. Somebody that I think because Bill is famous for doing this. I'm going to go ahead and take from the University of Arizona quarterback Nick Foles.
See, I'm a little upset because I was going to take him a little later down. I'm not going to lie to you. I was. Damn.
But that is a very Belichick thing to do.
It is.
There's not much else floating around that he really needs. So just in case Tom gets hurt, because I had Bledsoe and I brought in Tom Brady. At this point,
I'm not gonna lie, I was gonna bring him in on my next pick on Houston.
Yeah, at this point there isn't much else that he really needs. He's pretty well stacked. So let's bring in this guy and play him in the preseason and see if I can make people think he's amazing and then trade him away for a whack of shit. Because that's what Belichick does. See Matt Castle. See Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, normally he'd actually pick him in the second round, but where you've got 2 first-round picks and you don't really have a need, knowing what Nick Foles did, as Belichick, you might as well take him in.
Yeah, true.
There's not.
It might even be to make him better, even.
Exactly. I don't think that this is
It's not a
big
bad
issue.
pick,
No, not at all. I think this is where I think this makes perfect sense for him.
Yeah. Now moving on to pick 26, we have the Houston Texans. They need a wide receiver, a tackle, a guard, or a QB. Like I said, I would have taken Nick Foles here if he would have been still available. Unfortunately, he is not, and there is no other good QBs, in my opinion, that I really want to even touch on in comparison to the other good players available. So I could go for a wide receiver. Do I want to go that direction? Maybe. Tackle or a guard, maybe. Do you want to go with tackle? No, maybe not. I don't think it makes sense here. Guard? Maybe. Do I go with guard? So obviously the choices I got here is wide receiver or guard. I think. I think Houston will pull the trigger on a guard. They'll pick the guy out of Wisconsin, Kevin Zeitler, who would have been picked next by the Bengals, so the Houston ended up stealing him away this time. Could have gone with a wide receiver, but they do really need to bolster up that offensive line since they can't get a better QB. They're going to have to protect the one they got, and the one they got's not exactly great. So
Who did they
you're
have
going to
at
want
this
to get
point?
the best. I think at this point they had. It wasn't Carr, I don't think, at this point.
No, Carr was gone by this point. Did they have
Matt Schaub.
Actually, Schaub wasn't bad.
Schaub wasn't bad, but he's not great. He's definitely a pocket guy. You definitely want to protect him.
Yeah, you definitely want to protect him. Schaub was not mobile at all, but he had great receivers to throw to as well, and they had some good running backs there for a while, and he put up great numbers for a while.
They didn't have, at this point, they actually didn't have amazing wide receivers. They had solid wide receivers.
Yeah, they didn't have Andre Johnson anymore.
Yeah. So, but they still had some options there, but they really needed to shore up that offensive line.
And
so I think
it wouldn't be long
after
this that Schaub would just take a nosedive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because you couldn't get the QB you wanted, it's time to shore up what you got.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So at 27, we come back again to the Cincinnati Bengals, who are back on the clock. As previously stated, they need a bunch of things. You took a guard that they would have taken. He wasn't on my list, surprisingly. But there is something else that they can do here, and that's they're still going to shore up their offensive line. And they're going to select from the University of Georgia, center Ben Jones.
You know, I saw him on your list, and I looked through the draft, and I saw that there wasn't a lot of centers. And even though he was on the list, to me, he almost felt like a Riley Reef kind of thing. He was a decent center, but not amazing.
I think he was a lot better. But being that
I don't say not saying that he couldn't get picked first round, but he fell where I expected him to be, which is towards the bottom
of the first round. And I think he would be a good center for quite some period of time in that particular offense, blocking for Lamar Miller and blocking for them. I think he plays a decent style of football. I think that he's still going to be able to do quite well.
Yeah. So the thing is, I had him on my list, but he was like at the bottom because the thing is, I have basically none of my teams really needed a center.
Teams that really needed centers.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I didn't really have any teams that needed one, so it just for me couldn't justify putting him in my first round picks because there was just most of my teams needed other things far more. So I think that leads us to pick 28, which belongs to the Green Bay Packers.
It does.
Which hurts my soul a little bit, but that is okay. They need a defensive end, an outside linebacker, a safety, or an offensive tackle. So they could try to protect, but I think they really need to work on their defense at this point because obviously they need 3 out of those: defensive end, outside linebacker, safety. Is apparently their most needed things. I think their defense must have been at this point weaker. Maybe not exactly bad, but not great. The other option, like I said, is going for an offensive tackle, but not really great options there. So I think going defensive end makes more sense. Or possibly, I don't think there is any outside linebackers left. Are there? Hold on, let me check. think we got rid of all of them. Yeah. So, I could do something weird. I could go for like a corner. I don't think that makes sense though. There was only really. I could go safe. You know. Huh. Yeah, this is actually starting to get tough because I have to make some interesting choices that I'm not sure I like. Because this is turning into a direction that I was not expecting.
That's why we do this stuff.
I think, though... No, I don't want to do that either. Do I go that way, or do I go... Okay. You know what? I think they do need a defensive end. I think going with the best defensive end that's currently available, in my opinion, makes sense. Which is going to end up being Akeem Hicks out of... I have no idea where
Regina.
he came from. Regina?
He played for the Regina Pats.
Regina. Well done, Akeem Hicks.
They actually drafted him out of the Canadian Football League.
Yep.
He's also... I have him listed as a defensive tackle, but he probably moved back and forth between the two positions.
He must have, yeah. He must have. And I think ultimately that does make sense for what the Packers do need. They do need a defensive end. They do need somebody who can move around a little bit. Obviously, he's not quite the defensive end linebacker that you would want, but I think ultimately defensive end makes sense for him. I think what did they end up picking originally at this spot? I think they ended up picking Nick Perry as a defensive end, which I think Akeem Hicks is definitely better than that. So, they're sticking with the same position, just a better player.
All right. Remind me, because we come now to pick 29, which is the Minnesota Vikings. Remind me where you went with your pick. Did you grab a wide receiver? I think you did. You did grab T.Y. Hilton, didn't you?
I went T.Y. Hilton, yeah.
Okay. So, having addressed, because I looked at potentially giving them a wide receiver here, because there is still one out there. I don't have him on my sheet, but there's still one out there that I looked at, and I was like, oh, I didn't know he was drafted in 2012. He never made a Pro Bowl, but he was still a really, really solid wide receiver. Sadly, he's probably going to slip into the second round here now. Be that as it may, and be that as it is, I have them still needing an offensive tackle, and I don't think there's enough good ones. Even Reef, I don't think is good enough to want to be picked here.
You
personally.
could, but yeah,
you could,
yeah.
But I still
He's
need
probably
them
still be
needing-
available in the second.
Both their safeties are okay, but not spectacular and could use an upgrade. Unfortunately, the one that they picked here is Gonzo. So they're going to show up their secondary in another way. And out of North Alabama, they're going to take quarterback Janoris Jenkins.
Janoris Jenkins. Is he the one that ended up changing his name to Jackrabbit?
I have no idea. All I know is he played for the Rams for a while, and he actually turned out really good.
I think that's
he also played in New York.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he goes by Jackrabbit.
Okay,
that's how I have it written down, was by Jackrabbit, and I was like, oh, is that the same player? I wanted to make sure that was so that I could clear him off my list.
He wound up being
no, that totally makes sense. That makes
really
sense.
great corner for a long period of time. He had some off the field issues, but he never really had those when he was playing in the league. So
no, when he was playing in the league, he was very good.
Yeah, he cleaned up very well, and I think personally, playing in Minnesota and playing with that kind of system, I think he does incredibly well, and I think he upgrades their secondary an immense amount. And I think under 100%. Zimmer, because I think it's Zimmer. No, it's still Childress.
It's still Childress.
Either way, he's an amazing player, plays incredibly well, and I think that upgrades their secondary. I'm a little sad to see Harrison Smith go, but I'll take Janoris Jenkins in his place.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't disagree with you here. All right, so we're moving on to pick 30, which belonged to the San Francisco 49ers, who ultimately need a wide receiver, a corner, and a guard. Now I see that they ended up going with a wide receiver, which I could do. Could definitely do that. There is some options there. Cornerback's definitely still there. Guard. Yeah. I mean, technically there's guards there, but do I think that they're good enough to be picked at this point? I think most of them are probably gonna slip into round 2. I don't think so. I don't think picking a guard makes sense here for them. I think. Hold on. Just to make sure I'm not crazy. I want to pick. Do I go that way? Or do I go... Go that way. I think that they will go wide receiver here. And I think they'll go for the guy out of California, Marvin Jones.
That's who I was going to grab for Minnesota if you hadn't grabbed the wide receiver where you did.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't disagree with that pick at all.
Yep. I think it makes sense here. I think that, they wanted a wide receiver. They're going to get a wide receiver, and they're going to get one far better than who they picked at it as A.J. Jenkins. So I think it makes sense here.
Oh, I don't disagree. I think that makes a lot of sense overall. Which means we now come all the way back around to the 31st overall pick, which is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who need a couple of different things. And I've already taken care of the outside linebacker issue, so we're no longer going to have any issues with them not having... they still took the guy that they were going to wind up taking in the second round.
Now, will they do it again?
No, probably not. Because at this point, they still really need a quarterback, but there aren't any that I think are any good left. All the good quarterbacks are gone, so they're going to have to address that in free agency. So at this, or through trades, or whatever else they're going to do. So at this point, they still need a cornerback, and they still need a strong safety. You're not going to find a cornerback. Or a strong safety. They could also use a defensive end. With that all being said, I think at this point, at this point, they're going to go and grab from Vanderbilt University, cornerback Casey Hayward.
Casey Hayward, yeah.
That isn't a bad pick at all. He wound up having a pretty good career. I think he solidifies some more of that defensive need that the Buccaneers had at that point. I think he winds up being a very solid contributor in their secondary. I think overall that really does help them quite a bit at this point.
All right, fair enough. I think that makes my last pick personally pretty easy. The last pick does belong to the New York Giants, who happen to need a tight end, a running back, and a middle linebacker. They did end up going with a running back in this spot. I'm not picking that same running back. I am instead actually picking the running back who you would have normally picked, Doug Martin. It's a far superior upgrade to who they ended up getting at David Wilson. There's no question, and I think that would have ultimately helped out the Giants, especially in this time period, because they had absolutely no run game, and were asking their quarterback to literally throw all the time.
The other running back I would have accepted there is Alfred Morris.
Yes, he was my other option, but I think Doug Martin was just a more solid...
Doug Martin was a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think the Bucs actually took him at 31.
They did. That's what I'm saying. So that's why I'm saying that's why
the
Giants ended up getting a better running back because they ended up not having the option to get him originally. So now they could.
But looking at the way things worked out for the Bucs, I think this is better overall for them.
Probably, and I think this is also probably better overall for the Giants based upon what happened for them
Oh,
too.
100%. 100%. I don't say that that's incorrect whatsoever. So there we go. That's the end of the first round. Notable people that did not get grabbed.
Quite a few actually.
Well, the ones on my list at least that did not get grabbed that at least made Pro Bowls and were good players. Alfred Morris, as we just talked about, he's going to slip into the second round. Kalichi Osemele from Iowa State, a pretty good offensive guard for a while. Also, Brandon Brooks, that's a guard name I know. Yep. Malik Jackson, who wound up playing in Denver, he actually had some good seasons as a defensive end. Dontare Poe slips entirely out of the first round. I still think he gets picked up somewhere in the second round pretty early.
Oh, pretty early on, yeah. I actually could see him going to several places very early on.
It would,
because he was on my radar a couple of times.
Going probably the third pick of the second round.
I was gonna say either that, or I could see him going to Denver. But
yeah, either that.
Because they ended up picking a defensive tackle there anyways.
Defensive tackle, defensive end, and Zach Brown and Justin Bethel. Those are some major names that did not go in the first round. So that's who we think, if we redrafted that round, the first round, knowing everything we know today, I think that's kind of the way that would work itself out. I think that that probably makes a lot more sense, and I think it changes the trajectory of a lot of players and teams. I think that would be very, very interesting at this point.
I agree.
So, we'll have to see how that... I would love to see how that would work out.
Yeah, I was going to say, we can't exactly see how that works out.
No, I would love to go back and take a look and see if it worked out that way, how that goes, because I think that's a very interesting series of picks now.
There was a fun way that we could put that into like some type of stats engine and kind of just see what happens.
Yeah, with everything, like if they knew, with all other things being the way they were, putting those players in and seeing how they would grind out under those circumstances. Do you still get hurt? How does it still play out?
Exactly.
Yeah, taking a look at those probabilities, I think I would like to see that. So,
exactly.
If anybody's watching and knows of a place where you could do that, that would be a lot of fun.
That would be. That makes things far more interesting, and it'd be kind of fun to see kind of how the players would have changed franchises and possibly changed their own situations. Who knows? Some of these players might end up getting injured far sooner than they normally did, and actually,
absolutely. I could totally agree that Russell Wilson could get injured very early on, a la Andrew Luck, and Andrew Luck could play for an incredible amount of years and lead Washington to a Super Bowl. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
I actually think it's more likely that Tannehill leads the Browns to a Super Bowl, but, that's just me.
Possibly, but remember, Tannehill had such weird problems early on with Miami.
Well, that was Miami, though. Miami was weird.
Yeah,
I actually think it's far more likely
the Browns at this point were kind of weird, though, too.
Yeah, I actually think it's far more likely the Bengals do much better with the Red Rifle and looking at getting Lamar Miller and everything else that they had floating around there. Then all of a sudden, and getting that center and blocking more. I think the Bengals actually make a big push towards relevancy.
Yeah, probably true.
I still don't know if they can overcome the fucking Patriots, but
probably not. Same thing with the Jets. Like, even though I said the Jets better than what they had, still not overcoming the Patriots
there. I think it would be interesting, though. I think the team that intrigues me the most is looking at the Vikings having T.Y. Hilton that high, and then getting their hands on Janoris Jenkins, and how that changes the trajectory. Because at the time we had Stefon Diggs, so we had two very good. We had one very good deep receiver. Huh?
Diggs came later.
Who did we have?
We didn't have Randy Moss at that point.
No,
we had Percy Harvin.
Long gone. Hold on.
We had Percy Harvin. I know that.
We did have No Mercy Percy. We definitely had No Mercy Percy.
I see this is the problem. This is why I picked wide receiver for him, because I can't think of any that they had. They must not have had much. I know they had Kyle Rudolph, I think, at that point. But he's not a wide receiver, obviously.
We did have Kyle Rudolph. We also had Jarius Wright. Basically, you had Percy Jenkins and a bunch of nobody. Greg Childs, Percy Harvin.
Yeah.
but outside of that, you really didn't have anybody. So
And see, that's the
I
thing. As
would
much as
love
we
to have
give
seen-
shit to Ponder, we didn't give him anything to throw to.
Exactly. And I think Ponder having T.Y. Hilton, because Percy Harvin was amazing when he
wasn't dealing
play.
with migraines.
Yeah, when he could play. He like, honestly, I think his career trajectory changes if we legalize marijuana, but that's a whole different discussion, because that really helps with his migraines and everything. Or maybe if CBD oil is a thing at that point and is legalized. Yeah. I don't know. All I know is that it would have helped him a lot more. Percy Harvin was an amazing player when he was on the field and could play. So having somebody who could be on the field all the time with T.Y. Hilton is, I think that helps out Christian Ponder quite a bit. And then I think, because looking at it...
Now it also gives you the option to be able to run most of the time your offense through Peterson, but then you can still play action, have a mobile QB play action into a T.Y. Hilton.
Because here's the funny thing.
That sounds great to me.
You can name maybe one cornerback that anybody knows that is on the Vikings at this point.
Off the top of my head, no.
Antoine Winfield Sr.
Oh, Winfield. Okay, yeah.
That's the only one that you would know.
I thought he was a safety, not a corner, so that's why I didn't even think about him.
He was a corner. I think we moved him to safety at some point.
Oh, okay. My bad.
Because we also had Marcus Sherrills and...
Oh, I remember Sherrills a little bit.
Brandon Burton, and...
Nope.
This is also the year that we wound up drafting Robert Blanton, but he never...
He really
didn't lived up. Like, I was hoping he was going to. I think he was Notre Dame, and I think I had high hopes for him. And here's a name you might remember: Andrew Sendejo.
Sendejo, yeah.
Who doesn't remember that name? But at this point in time, we had Sendejo as our free safety. So definitely an upgrade with Harrison Smith there.
Unfortunately, no Harrison Smith.
Yeah. Anyway, Jamarcus Sanford, too, is another name that we might recognize a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
All right, but at this point in time, I think getting that cornerback of Janoris Jenkins in there and everything, I think the Vikings would probably benefit the most from this draft, if you really want my opinion.
It definitely benefits and also paints a picture of, even if Christian Ponder still doesn't work out, you still have the ability to look at what you've got and go, hey, this is still salvageable if we pick up a different QB. Which they ended up ultimately doing. They ended up getting Brett Favre after that. So imagine Brett Favre with T.Y. Hilton. Oh boy.
Oh yeah, imagine Brett Favre throwing to T.Y. Hilton and actually having that to throw to. And imagine even better, still being able to get Stephon Diggs and having Diggs and Hilton together.
Oh gosh, yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's just disgusting.
Yep.
And
then you still get Thielen because he walked on.
And then still getting Thielen because Thielen was a walk-on. Could you imagine Diggs, Thielen, and Hilton?
I think that changes. I think some things play out the same, but I think we're in a better spot than we are today.
I think that's true for most of the teams we drafted for today. I think
probably most of them. I think there's only a couple that maybe didn't get as well off than others.
Well, the Panthers are going to play out the same.
Yeah, I think the Panthers play the same. I think Washington actually still plays out fairly similar.
I would agree with that.
I mean, yeah, you don't get RG3 and you get Luke. You still get Luck, but you still have the same problem that you're going to have that you did with.
I agree with that.
RG3.
I still think Cleveland plays out the same because Tannehill had a wonky career, and I think they do what Miami did and trade him and get something for him, and then he becomes good wherever he goes. The one that I'd be interested to see is what happens in Arizona. Do they hang around with Cousins for a while because it took him a couple of years to find his footing? How good is he going to be right away? I think it's going to be fun to see. The other one that I think is interesting, I think the player that would be helped most by this draft is Nick Foles. Being able to play in New England behind Tom Brady and with Bill Belichick. I think that changes his career arc entirely.
That also changes Phillies though too, because remember they really needed Nick Foles at that point.
Yeah,
because
when
they Carson Wentz gets injured.
Carson Wentz, who got hurt, and then had Nick Foles lead them to the Super Bowl, and then Carson Wentz won it.
And for those wondering, yes, Nick Foles didn't get traded there. He was drafted by the Eagles.
Yeah, he was drafted by the Eagles in like the 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah, he had been there
Or
forever. So
yeah, third round, 88th pick.
third round. So he would have done the same thing with the Patriots. He would have just stuck around. He would have had no reason to go anywhere. Kind of like Garoppolo sat behind Brady for several years just because.
Yeah, agreed.
So, I mean, think about Philly without having the ability to back up to Nick Foles. Who do they back up to instead? Maybe they don't have the success that they had with Foles.
I agree. I 100%
Maybe they don't win that
agree.
Super Bowl, you know?
Yep, I 100% agree. Maybe they don't win the Super Bowl. Maybe this would have been the first year they would have had a chance to right here in the Super Bowl they won. And it totally changes
Yeah.
Philly's arc, too.
Yeah. It
Because
does.
with Wentz, hold on.
Excuse
Me. With Wentz going down and getting hurt, um,
Excuse you.
the year that they won the Super Bowl, now what? Do they suck? Do they suck that year and not get to the Super Bowl? Do they wind up with a top overall pick?
Yeah,
Do
who
you
knows?
repick a QB instead of Wentz at that point? I mean, it changes Philadelphia's arc quite a bit, I think. I think that's the one team that gets the most change out of this draft.
Mm-hmm.
So it also
Yeah, they
changes
completely
Seattle's draft because I don't think they're in the Super Bowl in a couple of years, or
No,
not,
probably not.
next year actually. After this
No,
season,
probably
the
not.
season after, they're not in the Super Bowl at all because they don't have. I don't think Russell Wilson is there for them.
No, Russell Wilson's not there. They don't got Bobby Wagner
And
either.
they don't got Bobby Wagner. No, I think that changes their team complexion quite a bit too. I still think they wind up with a very.
I still think they have
solid-
some success, but it's not nearly as crazy as what they ended up getting.
So, just out of curiosity, because I'm one of those guys. I like to do some weird crap every so often.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can find a way to do this real quick here. Blub, 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 blub. There we go. Bink. Alrighty. Just curiously looking. Because I'm looking at the next draft, where presumably they'd have had a halfway decent pick at the time. And looking at available cornerbacks, that would have been interesting. I think that would have been very interesting. Okay. I think that's interesting. Presuming everything would have played out the way that it had for the following season, you know who I think they'd have grabbed? The guy who's their current quarterback.
Geno Smith?
Yeah.
You think they
he
would
was
have been able to get him?
He was drafted in the second round in 2013 by the Jets. I think they could have grabbed him in the first.
Maybe.
There wasn't really a plethora of quarterbacks. E.J. Manuel was one of the only quarterbacks taken in that first round. Could you imagine Pete Carroll getting Geno Smith earlier and being able to help him and do everything that he did with him this last season earlier?
Yeah.
Maybe
Well, that all
Geno
depends
doesn't
also
wind
if
up-
Geno. Well, that depends also if Geno is ready at that point. Maybe it's because you have to remember that the right time, right place. It's possible that Geno wasn't in the right headspace when he was younger, which is why he failed.
It's
as a
also
Jets
possible
QB.
that he was in the New York City Jets. Who
It is. I'm not
stunk.
disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I am making a valid point. That's
You
all I'm
are,
saying.
and it very well could have been his headspace, but I still think he winds up a lot better.
Probably.
Yeah.
They're probably also more willing to give him a little bit more time because it's Seattle, and at that point, Seattle wasn't known as being a high winning team, anyways.
No, but
So
I think, and I also think with him having a very good running game at that point, because they still had Marshawn Lynch, I think that
Yeah.
makes Geno a lot better, and I think Geno would succeed better in Seattle the following season than he did in New York.
probably.
So if I'm totally going to go that route, I'm going to say that next season is when Seattle would probably grab Geno. I think they grab him.
If they can, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think they'd grab him middle first, low first round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on if they feel that they can get him at that spot, and if they really want him at that time, if they had him highly valued or not.
Well, and it
It's up-
also,
yeah.
like, we're doing the redraft type of idea.
Yeah.
If you just look at it from a redraft perspective. I honestly feel like that's where he would go. But yeah, no.
Yeah,
so,
but there might be other teams who might try to grab him earlier too. We just don't know. 100%.
yeah, knowing what we know, Buffalo. Well, and here's the thing, he didn't have a great career until this last season.
Yeah.
But Seattle, knowing what they would know about him, that's why I said Seattle might take.
Yeah, if he falls down that point, they probably would. But there's also a chance that somebody else tries to pick him earlier.
100%,
Who knows?
100%. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the 2012 redraft. And sadly for us, that's probably going to bring this podcast to an end because there isn't much of a Vikings corner to be had. And I don't have a hockey corner because I'm not going to try to spitball a top 10 power rankings off the top of my head. I will have that for next week, though. So I've also decided, go ahead and I'm going to let you know, we're doing a 3-team trade in trade dissections this upcoming week. Nice. And boys, it's a monster. It involves a rushing leader going from one team to another. And I think it's going to be, it's going to be a very fun. In fact, the guy's a Hall of Famer. So we're going to leave that alone. That's an NFL trade. So for those of you that want to see it, I'd say tune in. I'll have it up sometime this week. So for right now, what we're going to tell you is go ahead, stay bearded, stay awesome. If you like what we do, hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and hit that like button. Punch them just like Tyson Fury punching, who the hell was it? Deontay Wilder, knocking him out. Go ahead and share us with your friends because we're a little weird and we're a little bearded. For all of you, stay bearded, stay awesome. Bearded brother.
Bye.
Peace.